G'day, doggies fans. Welcome to the Coach's Eye. It's all things Bulldogs here again with Lee Addison, the rugby league coach, for the review of the Bulldogs-Sharks round 27 match, the game that ended the season. And just a reminder, Lee is running a end of season Ashes tour, which will have a massive. Will you tell me a little bit more about it again, Lee?
It's a very, very, very fair and very reasonable cost for the tour. Basically, for $6,500, you can get flights, accommodation in 4-star hotels, transfers throughout the week to games as well and back in a bus, test match tickets for the first 2 tests. And there's a kangaroo legend going to join us as well, which I will reveal this week, I think. So it's a great tour. I mean, I gave the travel agent the edict. I said, I want this to be affordable for people. I don't want to do a tour where people are getting priced out. I want it to be an option for people to easily see themselves doing it. So $6,500. I know $6,500 is a lot of money, but some people will have that somewhere, and it's a trip of a lifetime. I mean, if you've never been to England, just to experience London and will be a fantastic thing, and then Liverpool as well, where we'll be for the second week. And there's so many rugby league events that we're going to be announcing in the next few weeks too. So, and I just worry. I mean, we don't want to turn this into an Ashes podcast, but there's so many people just don't know how historical the Ashes is. I mean, I've been looking at tapes today from 1954. So, even my dad wasn't born then. So.
Well, I also think people don't realise how close England were to actually winning a couple of the last series. I remember a series where Darren Lockyer was the difference, like the complete difference, where England had leads in all 3 matches.
Yeah.
And then there was the late David Morrow, with Stewart onto Meninga, onto the big fella.
That's right, 1990. So the 2 series you're referring to there, 1990, Dave Morrow was the commentator.
Yeah.
And Australia won the test in the last minute at Old Trafford. And the other series you were referring to was the last one, 2023, that actually finished 3-0 for Australia. And at one point, Brett Kamali actually did a step off his left foot, I think it was, into either side of Barry McDermott, the prop. And Barry McDermott was the first person in the UK to get tear gassed by the police in the 90s, and as a result had a glass eye. So Brett Kamali just stepped onto his glass eye side, and he missed him, and that was the difference in one of the games. So it's bees appendages, I think you call them in Australia, but with a bit of a tougher name. Anyway, we're here to talk dogs, lad. I'm sure people are sick of me talking about pommies already. So
yeah, well, I'm sure the Dogs fans will be wanting to hear. They might hear some stuff they're already thinking with some of our fans, which is fair enough. But look, there's a bit of confusion in our fan base, but there's also a solid base who sort of understand that they're not going to give up hope. And we got there, which is the main part of the plan. But now we've got to go out there and prove to ourselves and prove to our fans that we can take the next step. So, what were your initial thoughts, Lee? What did you focus on? Did you watch the whole game?
That I watched the whole thing. Did it just for you and all the Doggies fans, because I felt I owed that to them after some of my comments last week. So I made sure I sat down and watched the game live this week. I'm worried if I'm a Dogs fan. I'm not a Dogs fan. I'm not an anybody fan. But I'd be worried if I was a Dogs fan about premiership credentials. So if you look at the bigger picture and the fact that you've had a better season than last year, then no, you're not worried. But if you're thinking about premierships, I would be worried. And so that's my first thing. Second thing, I think they've got a massive attacking problem. Thirdly, I am seeing signs that physically, whereas last week I said that Cameron Serraldo may have loaded his players up somewhat, then I'm revisiting that this week. I think there's a pattern emerging. I'd love to talk to you about that.
Okay. So
you go. What do you fancy talking about first?
Well, I think that's a good start. I think the game as a whole, I think the commentary on the game is a little bit, how do I say it, is a bit dramatic. Yet I felt it as a Dogs fan watching that. I want us to win every game. We made 100 extra tackles. The Sharks completed 44 from 46 sets, which is a phenomenal effort. But that also, see, when a team's able to complete high, sometimes that's can be because the opposition isn't doing enough to rattle them, doing enough to challenge them. I thought Craig Fitzgibbon was very. I think he's trying to put a bit of confidence into his own team by saying that the Dogs threw a lot at them. I think that's just media talk for well done, guys. We held them out. Yeah, and I believe that the Bulldogs had some passages of play which I wasn't that unhappy with, more so in the first 20 minutes after losing Bronson Cherry after 5. I felt we wrestled things back well. And not through our kicking game because Burton moved out of that. So they'll allowing Galvin to do the lion's share of the kicking, which means we're not as effective in where we end the ball. And I felt that we had some players there to ask some questions, and like a player like Stephen Crichton had some space a couple of times, decided to run the ball both times and got pulled up. Yeah, look, I'd like to say that's by design, but I don't know. I think there was some opportunities left out there, and from that point, the Sharks then got upfield, late tackle penalty. Late tackle 6 agains, which is we'll talk about on another podcast one day, how 6 agains and penalties counts are completely out of context with the game itself. Well, it could be 5-5, but if someone's getting a penalty on the first and someone's getting a penalty on the fifth, it's completely different. Same with 6 agains. So, look, all of these things, I felt the Dogs repelled Cronulla quite well for a fair period. They got us on an edge, which is they normally do that with Brendan Nickera. He's not in the team, which weakens them a lot. Jesse Calhoun's added some energy to them. I felt they ran hard, they tackled hard. And the Bulldogs, there was good stuff from individuals. I felt Josh Curran starting the match had a lot of – he's running – 2 weeks ago, Josh Curran was pedestrian. So when you're talking about energy, he was pedestrian. But the last 2 games, his energy has been a lot better. He had to start and then he had to move to an edge after being fatigued. When he probably getting a break, he had to move to an edge. That cost us a try in the second half, I'm pretty sure. They blamed it on Galvin, but I felt it was that 3 and 4 defender that you were talking about on the right side. And he didn't push out with enough vigor, which put everyone else under pressure. They didn't connect well enough in that scenario, and their last try they got to Atkinson, that was because of that. So look, the Sharks only got 3 line breaks with 100 extra tackles and a 44 from 46 completion. To them, they had a nice warm up for the finals. For us, rightfully, a few players worried me a bit. I feel Max King's, since the Roosters game, has improved week on week, and I believe he'll be at another level this week. And outside of that, we didn't really use Kurt Mann. Jamin Salmon, I felt, progressed a little bit, but some of his passing was down a bit as well. So, look, a lot of rocks, few diamonds, a nothing game, but yeah, it's confusing for Dogs fans.
You call it a nothing. You call it a nothing game. I think it's actually done the Dogs more harm than good, and I think the aim by the side that he put out, and also the opposition coach, there wasn't many players rested at all, if any. And I think the aim was to play themselves into form. And I think that in its own right and its own way is a worry. Melbourne opted to try and play their way into form too, and that failed. So that causes more problems sometimes.
Melbourne dropped more players, didn't they? But they still lost 2 players. Their 2 major players to injury, even though they rested a heap of players in the last 2 weeks, which is why I expected them to get beaten both games.
The first thing I said, it was an overarching point that I'd be worried if I was a Dogs fan. And then the third thing I said, there's a pattern emerging. So let me talk about the pattern. Last year, they ran out of juice spectacularly. If you remember, they took a trip to New Zealand, and then I think Bundaberg not long after that or before that. And then the week or two after that, they really ran out of juice. And we could look at that and think, oh, maybe it was a travel. But they did tail off. They lost the last 2 games of the competition last year, and then lost in the finals against a Manly side that were really busted and bruised, if you remember too. And then this year they've lost 3 games. They've lost. They've only won 5 of the last 11. I think you told me the stat. 7 out of the last 13 as well. That's not momentum in any way, shape, or form, and there's no way that can be massaged. And I don't. I'm always talking about premiership credentials here. Okay.
Yeah.
To win the premiership, you've got to be beating the bigger sides. So, from a coach's perspective, what I'm looking at now is what is Cameron Ciraldo doing with this side from a performance perspective in terms of physical performance throughout the year. And obviously, varying coaches do varying things, okay? So some coaches really front load the season because they want to hit the season hard. Other coaches, and I think this is starting to emerge even more in the game now, so the Roosters and Penrith have had a really good second half of the year, so I think they're more comfortable in their own skin that they can periodize their training accordingly to the back end of the year. I think the Bulldogs in both seasons have gone for a good early start, and traditionally you were able to do that. Melbourne have so many years started the season well, handled a bit of a dip mid-year, and then gone on a run at the end. So there's a few things that are starting to emerge in the thoughts around the game that you possibly can't do that even that much now, that you can probably only really put in a second half of the season, if you like, and step things up. The other thing is their defensive system, okay, which I mentioned last week. When you move up and in the first 10 minutes in particular, maybe even the first 20 minutes, they were really good at it. It looked really good. I thought they're on here. But then they just dropped off a cliff. They dropped off a cliff with defensive discipline, with penalties and 6 agains. And like you said, that's another podcast. But the up and in, if an opposition team is aware that you're doing up and in, they can actually make you run more meters in defense, right? So what can happen is you come up and in, the opposition attack can just play a little bit deeper. I've done this plenty against teams that do this. I've actually made them run further forward. Yep. So if you imagine they play the ball and the defense has to retreat 10 meters, if you're flying up, a good defense will cover 8 meters, sometimes 9, you know. Well, if you just play a bit deeper, you can actually ask them to cover more, and you can sacrifice a couple of tackles in a set. Do you remember early in the game, Cronulla was sort of kicking from the 40 because they couldn't really get out? I think sometimes they were just playing a little bit deeper, allowing the Bulldogs defence to cover some more meters. And that's the problem with the up and in defence. Up and out or up and slide, you can tend to hang your defensive line and you don't have to cover as many meters. The attack can come to you a little bit. So I think having done it like this most of the year, that can contribute to fatigue as well. So there's definitely a pattern emerging. Definitely a pattern emerging.
Yeah, the Sharks. I actually noticed with this. I actually said this while I was watching. I'm like, the Sharks. In different parts of the game, seemed to actually wait for us a bit when we had the ball, and was sort of weren't overcommitting themselves. And then when in other parts they were right in our face. So it was. And I actually noticed the young Panther side did this a little bit to us as well. So look, I think as far as the Dogs' normal pattern of play, opposition teams know what it is, which is what I would consider to be the biggest problem with our attack, is we are a bit predictable. But in saying that, they do have things up their sleeve, as every team will. You would know yourself that you don't leave it all on the table.
No.
And I also want to go back to the other point. So, talking about front loading of the season, if you looked at your season and saw that you had St George twice, Parramatta twice, South Sydney twice, and look, I rated all those teams bottom 4, bottom 5, Newcastle twice. All these teams at the start of the season, we beat them all pretty much except for the Broncos, which we won the second half of that match. And I actually spoke to someone who's pretty well knows the inside, and they actually said when they came off after that second half against the Bulldogs, it felt like they just had the preseason with Madge again. They felt the Dogs just controlled things for the second half. I know they had a massive 34-0 lead or something at halftime, which you've got to take that into account. But the point I'm making is the Broncos came out the following week and got smashed by the Titans, I think. Right? So, and I've heard stuff from the Penrith camp, like the Bulldogs was the toughest game they've played still all season. They rate that as the hardest game.
Mm.
Now, we expect Penrith are going to ascend from that. And the worry is that the Bulldogs are descending from that point. So that's where I get your point there. But I'd also say that Travis Toomer's prepared a lot of teams. The Roosters have perennial slow starters, and throughout since they won premierships, they've been slow starters, and injury has played a big part in them not getting to where they want to. So one thing I will say is that we had to start fast. We had to get these teams because the back end of our draw was against the last 5 premiership winners, right? So they needed to put points in the bank to be able to then test themselves against these sides. And while we haven't come up trumps, I think we're close enough to Melbourne. And I don't believe Melbourne are at full strength at the moment. I've said all year that they're not Melbourne Storm at the moment. A couple of mates have said the same thing. They're not. They go in and out of games. They don't know. They beat West 64-0 or something. Apart from that, it's been in and out. And even in all the Dogs wins, we had to win a lot of those games twice against teams that finish in bottom 5. So I'm not rating us down. I think it's hard. Like it's hard to beat teams in the NRL, whether they're first or last.
I'm going to go to a few of your points there. You said, the Broncos said it was the toughest game they played all year. Unfortunately, you don't get any points for that. And also an up and in defence is a brutal defence to play against because it goes to the instincts of the player, if you like, whereas sliding defence goes against the instincts somewhat. Secondly, half a game. that in itself provides warning. Okay, so winning half a game is not going to win you a premiership. You've got to.
Our coach wouldn't agree with that, but this is just me talking about.
Yeah, I know, and that's what you've got me on here for, Michael. The coach's eye, and that's why I'm giving it the Broncos had the job done. Now, the Raiders possibly thought they had the job done, and then Bulldogs came to the party there. When we look at that historically now, though, there's two ways of looking at it, isn't there? Glass half full or glass half empty. Maybe too many people have looked at it glass half full, and really it was glass half empty. Okay? Because if you can win one half and lose the other, which one's the most important half? Well, I'd argue the most important half is the one where the most points are scored. And the Broncos blew them off the park. The Canberra blew them off the park for a while. It's just that Bulldogs blew them off the park even more. So maybe there was warning signs in that have or haven't been heeded. Look, going to this game, which is what we were doing. We're reviewing this game. I thought it was going to be a great finals intensity game, and I think it probably maintained some of that intensity throughout. It's just that Cronulla were better at it. Both sides, I don't know if you remember, in the first 20 minutes had some sustained pressure. Cronulla had some pressure for 8 minutes, I think it was, didn't come up with a point. Bulldogs had some pressure for a similar amount of time, did not come up for a point. What happened then, though, like you said earlier, the Sharks came back a bit harder, their forwards ran harder. Everything just seemed to happen a little bit harder. And then the Sharks scored at that 3 and 4 in defender area on the left this time. And then Bulldogs had some pressure down the other end of the field, and this is where I saw the problem, okay? So I think the attack is far too readable for a very, very simple reason. They're going wide, they're moving the ball a lot on tackle 4. All right? So they're going 1, 2, 3, and then a shift. Okay? Now, in a 6 tackle set, settling for 3 plays is 50% of your attacking plays. Okay? I think it's as simple as Craig Fitzgibbon and Cronulla Sharks knew when the Bulldogs were going to move the ball sideways. It happened far too often. Then they changed a little bit later, the Bulldogs, and went the exact opposite way, which is just as bad. Too lateral without arresting the sliding defense or the moving defense of the opposition.
Without getting momentum.
Yeah, it's a confused attack, okay? I don't want to bung on anybody in particular, but it's happening for one of 2 reasons. The halves are either following the coach's instructions or the halves aren't getting it right and not following the coach's instructions, okay? And that's when conversations start happening about people. I can't imagine for the life of me that these players aren't following the coach's instructions, which means I don't think Cameron Serraldo was made this very simple concoction in his head. That I could predict when they were going to move the ball sideways. So if I'm a coach studying a tape and I'm playing the Bulldogs next week, I can tell my players, just wait till tackle 4, kill tackle 2, kill tackle 3, because statistically tackle 2 is the most important. If you kill that tackle 3, you'll be able to kill that one, and then 4 just gradually slide. Even the commentators were saying they seem to be running out of room, the Bulldogs, and that's what that tended to happen. On the defensive side of the football as well, they looked again heavy-legged after that 20-minute period. The try that Billy Burns scored at the 3-in defender, he went outside Haywood, but Kickow actually caused the problem in the tackle previously. He flew out the line to try and kill Toby Rudolph, if you remember, and put his head in the wrong place. So he knocked himself out of shape. So it's defensive disciplines like that. And again, when you're doing up and in defense, somebody who really wants to smash someone, it lends itself to that. Where a slide, you have to curb your instincts somewhat to come out the line. Burton in the centres has a tendency to turn in when he should be staying square as well. So that's probably a reason why he's been moved around a lot. What was also alarming from a Bulldogs point of view, how many high kicks has Connor Tracy fumbled this year? Or when he returned the kick, how many times he had the ball just stolen off him or knocked out of his grasp? But
it happened since
surely that's on one hand.
It happened since the Manly game when he got injured. He's busted. But look, I actually said that when he come back, the week he come back, he wasn't allowed to train for 2 weeks because of the nature of his injury, an internal gastric cyst thing. I don't know what they call it. And I was like, he'll make a couple of mistakes under fatigue tonight. And I actually been watching him. He's one player I've been watching very, very closely. And I'm actually thinking in the contact he's improving. But look, that's 6 points he gave away there. And he did the other week as well. had a couple of errors led to tries. So that is a problem in itself, but I think it will improve this week yet again. But Melbourne Storm are it doesn't matter who's there, they're going to test us with competed ball. There'll be a lot of tests where they'll try and get themselves some run through the middle and put their kick and compete for their kicks, not just wait for us to get it and smash us, which is what the Dogs tend to do. And some of our fans criticise that we don't compete for enough football. But look, there was definitely reasons.
You never know as well. The referee. Sorry, go on.
There's definitely reasons. There was context around, and you actually provided it around what happened with all the tries we conceded. Kick out then went off, so we also had to make a double adjustment. Burton wasn't doing the kicking, so it just put us into a hole out of our momentum. Now, while those players did a fair job for the most parts, they got their pants pulled down. Yeah. And when it was pulled down, the Sharks executed every time. Like, they only broke our line 3 times in that whole match out of 44 sets. Did they throw everything at us? I'm not sure. They weren't offloading at will. They weren't doing anything like that, which they can do to create from nothing. I've seen it. Will Kennedy wasn't trying to do remarkable stuff out of their own end. They got out of their own end really well. Serrato was right about that. We couldn't keep them trapped. So, look, there was a lot of things that we weren't good enough in what we're trying to execute, or Cronulla were just too good for us in that moment. But I think defensively we're not too bad still.
No.
If they get it right,
you just
hold possession. We can hold
you're not too bad, but the problem is you have a really weak area. It's like saying you've got a great roof, but you've got a hole in it.
Well, you need a foundation
got 2 holes,
you
one
put
on each
the roof
side.
On. Yeah, look, we've got weaknesses, but what we've proven is that
your defense is only
as
good as
we've got less weaknesses.
Your defense
than most
is only
other
as good
sides.
as what it leaks, Michael.
Yeah,
your defense. It's all well and good saying you've got this good defense, and it's doing okay. But the problem is, it's not keeping the points down because there's occasionally it just leaks, and that's a huge issue. And again, it's systemic. It's as systemic as well as personnel. Toby Sexton was like a speed bump in defense, right? Probably still is. He's not dead. So
I'll just come to his defense there. He was kept out of first grade for 10 rounds.
And any chance I can talk, you've asked me on this podcast, mate. Any chance I can talk, and then we'll talk about Toby Sexton. Like, you've replaced him with Gareth. Who's Gareth? Galvin, who's another one who's very, very suspect in defence, and you've got a system that doesn't lend itself to having somebody suspect in defence. So it's not that strong a defence, really, because it's getting exposed.
Did you actually watch Galvin really just focus on him only in defence last week?
No,
2 days ago?
I watched the game. I've watched Galvin enough to know that he's not a very good defender.
Physically, he's not, and his reads aren't too bad. But I'm telling you, the last 2 games, he's smashed blokes. He's got behind and put his shoulder into forwards and knocked them down. That means his defence is improving.
Well, that's great, but ultimately, that is still a weakness in the team.
Yeah, well, our team has weaknesses. All teams do. Like that's the whole thing. And on the day, it's about how you play your game plan to minimise, how vulnerable you are to your weaknesses, and to expose the weaknesses of the opposition, and that'll be the game plan. That failed last week. We didn't execute that. So
this 3 and 4 in defender has been a problem for over a year. It's not been fixed yet.
It's been a problem for a long time. It's been gradually getting better, and that's the whole point. That's why when I'm not as concerned, because I'm not mediocre by any stretch of the imagination. My expectation is that they can go out there and win every game. I'm just a bit of a realist in the fact that if you were to line up our team now and say, okay, pick your team out of all these 8 finals teams, how many Bulldogs players make the best squad? If you got to pick every player out of the 8 teams.
Again, that's.
But
I mean,
look,
we could talk significantly about that, but again, the game's a lot more than that, Michael. So,
I get it.
and Premier,
It's a
think
team
about
sport.
all the players that Melbourne have signed, and everyone's
Mm.
thought to themselves, why have they signed that player?
Yeah.
Yes, they've had some players. They've got the Cameron Smiths, the Munsters, etc. But a lot of their players, you've thought, why the hell have they signed that player? And that's and again with Penrith, I mean, you take some of those Penrith players out of their system, they're not going to look as good in other places too. If it was all about personnel, then the richest team would win all the time. And even pre-salary cap days, the richest team didn't win all the time, and that never happens in sport. The richest team don't always
100%.
win.
It's not an excuse. What it is just just another layer of context to consider to say, look, there's no be all and end all. I'll tell you now. Did you think that Max King was ever going to be picked in an Origin side? Whether he was the right choice or not.
I didn't have an opinion on it, to be honest. And
what about Kurt
when
Mann?
I think about it now with hindsight again, and you talk about the draw and everything else, don't forget, on one hand, you've just been telling me how easy the draw was in the first half of the year. So they picked an Origin.
I didn't say it was that easy. I said it was
based on an easier draw.
We would need to beat if we were going to make the finals. So we had to make sure we beat them.
But it was an easier draw.
Different.
It's an easier draw. So somebody got picked in Origin, beating forward packs that were in the bottom 5 of the competition, based on what you were saying. So with a bit of hindsight,
more context,
that provides context too.
Exactly, you can provide it both ways, and that's the whole point. That's why that's why people shouldn't just say it's one way or the other, because within the walls, the fact is Cameron Ciraldo, Jacob Carrazas was in the conversation, was 18th man. Matt Burton, again, 18th man twice, which affected our mid-season, no doubt. There was a lot of disruptions already there.
I don't doubt any of that. And Cameron Ciraldo, as I've said, Cameron Ciraldo's doing a great job. The problem is, he was also a rookie coach when he arrived at the Bulldogs, right? So he's going to get some things wrong. He is not the second coming of Christ. He's going to get some things wrong, right? And there's a few things popping up, and that's, again, why you got me on this podcast, and that's why I highlight them. So the Bulldogs have got to address why they're dropping off at the back end of the year, because a premiership side would at least have 50% of victories against these bigger sides as a very minimum against the bigger sides, your Penriths, your Melbournes, your Roosters, etc. And because Canberra haven't won every game, So, secondly, they've got to look at why they keep getting broken in that 3-in area, and they've tried different combinations, yet it still happens. So that suggests to me it's systemic, and it's been picked. And exactly what I said last week about how to beat the Bulldogs, I said over a year ago, and I think Cronulla did some of it this week, especially by dragging them out and making them run more. So, there's loads of improvement, but the club's moving in the right direction. The club's, everything I've said today is from a coach's eye, which is what you asked me to do, and secondly,
winning a premiership.
Yeah. So so right. Before any Bulldogs fans attack my house or anything, that's where I'm coming from.
Oh, there's a lot of fans that are going to agree with you, Lee, and that's why I've got you on, because I want to show that. I guess the other question, I've got a couple of other questions I want to ask you about preparation with the legwork and stuff. I've got some footage recently of after games of what Ciraldo has been doing with some players. So he had, after the Storm game, which I think, I'm not sure if Josh Curran played. I think he was dropped for that match. But he had Josh Curran, Reid Marnie, and Jamin Salmon, after the game finished, spent about half an hour to 40 minutes doing training drills and fitness drills after the game.
So they weren't playing, and they did some conditioning after the game. Yeah.
No, I think Curran might have been 19th man. The other two
Okay.
guys played. Salmon would have played the most minutes,
Okay.
and Marnie
How
would
many
have played
minutes
the least
roughly?
minutes. I think Salmon would have played probably 35, 40 minutes.
And then did more
Um,
training afterwards.
They did more training afterwards, yeah.
So what's happening there is they are obviously measuring what I've just been talking about. They're trying to get it down to perfection. And there's some coaches that will think in terms of strength and conditioning, and there's other coaches that will think in terms of human instinct, energy in the tank, etc., etc. Okay, so some people will look at it really scientifically and go, well, such and such has only played 40 minutes. He probably, to stay on track conditioning wise, probably needs to do something that will equate to at least another 20 or 30 minutes.
Okay.
I think there's a potential there that can be paralysis by analysis, though, too, because ultimately, no matter what sports science you put into things, no matter what money you pump into different elements of your preparation, no matter how many corners you turn, X's and I's you dot and T's you cross, etc., you've still got that cycle where people get up for a game mentally, and then there's a dip from a game mentally. Okay, so we work on cycles, don't we? You'll know this as a fan. You probably think about your whole week based on when the Bulldogs are playing, and if the Bulldogs do well, that's you hunky-dory for a day or two, okay? If they don't do well, it can affect you a little bit, okay? It just, I'm feeling great today. Oh, hang on, my Dogs didn't do well. I'm the same with Manchester City, mate, okay? So everything's right in the world. Oh, no, City lost on the weekend against Brighton, So players do that too. Players have a care, a want, a desire, and they also have a focus, especially when you think about some of the other things that come into it. So, for example, a player might have more family members attending that week and really wants to play well. Or a player might have more family members attending that week or friends or whatever it may be. Or he's got a contract looming and the coach only uses him for 15 minutes and then he's asking him to train for half. So that's probably a little bit paralysis by analysis. I'll tell you another coach I know who did this a lot, Tim Sheens. And he did it on an Australian tour in when he was the Australian coach and players were doing training at the end of a session. And there was actually a time when the players during that tour said, enough's enough. We need a break. And so, but I just wonder if it's a bit too much because other players would have been relaxing and showering and debriefing and then they're training on the field. So I think it proves as a scientific approach. Put it that way.
Oh, just to add, just to give you some information on that. So in the after that Storm game, Reid Marnie only played, I think, 15 minutes or something, or 13 minutes. Curran didn't play, and Salmon played 28 minutes. Now, in the next match, Salmon played 48 minutes, 53 minutes. Curran actually played 80 minutes, and Marnie actually doubled his time. He played 26 minutes, and against the Sharks, Curran's played 80 minutes. Salmon's played his year high at 55, but we did lose a player out of the squad after 5, which affects things. And Reid Marnie actually played 76 minutes.
Yeah.
At the hooker position.
I sometimes think, and the more we go down the high performance road, we're getting further and further away from this. But sometimes I mentor coaches at some good levels too, right? And I say, what would happen if you had a week off? If you and all the coaches had a week off and just left the players to their own devices, what would happen? And all of them think that well, first of all, they don't know how to answer it, which means they hold a bit too much. They hold a bit too much credence to what they do. Sometimes you've just got to leave play. You've got to back off players and let them find their own way with things. So yeah, and I think what's possibly happening with that little bit of evidence you've given me, because there's other things that go into the minutes of a game. How well do you play? How many hit-ups you make? How many tackles you make? How many meters do you cover? How did you feel before you went into the game? Did you pick up any knocks during the game? There's so many other things that go into it. The thing I would like to say is that I just wonder with the Bulldogs, if they're just eased off this week and had 2 or 3 days off, and then had a red hot crack this week, how would they go? And somebody like Wayne Bennett or Jack Gibson back in the day, or they're the kind of coaches who do stuff like this, you know. Like they just go, right, I get a feel for the players, and they're just not, you know, we do, because you can do all this work. I've done all this with GPS, heart rate, anything, and you think, well, all the data says that we should be fine, but we're not. And it can be something as simple as, you know, they're just mentally fatigued, and then how do you measure that? You know, so at least they're trying, though. And I also think it speaks to the fact that they're trying to find the answer to what I've mentioned in this podcast, i.e., why they're tailing off 2 years in succession.
Well, what I noticed before Curran had that week before he was benched for, 19th man or 18th man for Storm, is his energy levels were dropping, and he was making a lot more mistakes leading up to that. You know, he had some good moments in games because he always tries hard. He gives his all, but his execution was off. His mind was off at different times, and then he lost his spot. But since coming back, he's been one of our best players with his energy and stuff as well. So I'm thinking that
I don't think that's because he did extra.
They might have individual plans for people. They do have individual plans for people. And Travis Toomer is well regarded, you know, like the Roosters in South Sydney. He's been paid a lot of money to be a conditioning coach. He's one of the best in the business. And they have recuperated a lot of players with massive knee injuries and stuff and got them going, got their careers going, you know. It's one of those things, though, isn't it? It's like the game at the moment.
You're damned if you do, damned if you don't sometimes.
Yeah. They say lightning doesn't strike twice, and then it does, and then it doesn't strike for ages, and you think you know what's going on. As soon as you think you know, then it all falls apart again. But that's the thing with coaching.
Well, imagine they do everything they've done this year. Imagine they do everything they've done this year, but the first 5 rounds were playing Penrith Roosters, Melbourne, and they won them all. Mentally, they'd be different now.
Probably.
If everything was the same except the draw and they beat those, right? So mentally, they would be different. And they probably wouldn't go into the market to change the halves.
So if you had a player, I'll ask you another question. We got to Manly last year, and we looked the better side for the majority of it. People still don't know how we lost. And then after about 60 minutes,
I know how you lost.
It was because fatigue gave away a lot of penalties.
You lost because Manly had some better players in certain positions. That's why you lost.
In the end, and we can talk about forward passes, but that's for every team. That last try, though, the reason they got in that position is because we had a player under fatigue make 3 crucial errors, which handed the field position and gave Manly the opportunity to take advantage of our fatigue, which they got us in one big. But
there's things that build up to that too. So the fact that Cronulla points came when they did was because of the pressure they'd built earlier, right? So you can look at isolated incidents, but none of them are an island, right? They are a consequence. So Viliami Kikau probably felt he needed to whack Toby Rudolph because Toby Rudolph probably whacked a few of his forwards a few sets earlier. So everything is a cause and effect. So
I actually 100% agree with that. That whole thing you just said, then I 100% agree with it. Do not disagree at all. Context around that. The whole Bulldogs game plan is built around out fatiguing teams. And if they are unable to do it, we don't win. But if we have more possession, we're winning 9 out of 10 matches. That's just the way it's been.
I have to go in about 5, mate. So you said that you had a couple of questions. So
yeah, well, that was one of the questions around the around the fitness stuff, just to hear your perspective on that, because I just thought it was really interesting to know that. And one thing that was also noticed at the Cronulla game, about maybe something to do with preparation. So in the finals, you're not allowed to run out on the field before the game. That's right, is it? You have to warm up inside.
I think it depends on the stadium, I think.
Okay. Oh, so if it's
I'm not sure.
So I think at Amy, Well, we didn't come out onto a core stadium to warm up, and the Sharks did. Just stuff like that. I don't know. I thought that was significant. We didn't come out and warm up against the Broncos either, and got smashed. We weren't ready.
Look, again, I mean, imagine the bus was late and they landed 5 minutes before. I've seen teams win games when that's happened. So,
I've won a game when that's happened.
You tend... It could be a factor, yes. These are all variables. How important is it? I think they're probably all 1%, if you know what I mean. You've heard the term 1%ers. And some of
add them all together, and they add up.
Yeah, and some of them will work for you, and some of them won't. And some of them you try, and you can do too many 1%ers as well, and you can end up confusing your players somewhat.
Do you think if Melbourne or Canterbury win in a close game, either team, they'll be given credit for making the prelim?
Yeah, probably the Bulldogs more than the Storm, because I think we sort of expect it from the Storm, don't we?
Yeah, well, I'm not worried about their last 2 losses. It's more a concern for me about the Storm's performance over the year has been inconsistent, even though they still win games. You know what I mean? They still win because
I can't imagine the Storm. I can't imagine the Storm being shit for 3 games in succession. That's a technical term, that shit.
Well, I wanted them to beat the Roosters, to be honest.
Yeah. And Harry Grant's back too, so he is huge. I mean, if you think that your number 9 is the first person who touches the ball on every play the ball, more or less, at least 97% of them or 96% of them. So that is huge. That is huge.
If he's fit, which he should be, he's our biggest danger.
Yeah.
With his ability to know the actual moment to run, whether it's once in the game or 3 times in the game, it usually pays off. And he's a grub, He sticks his fingers where he shouldn't. John Opawati got in a lot of trouble for things that Cameron Smith has taught Harry Grant how to do. Best people off the ground. Love listening to Cam Smith and Harry Grant. Very articulate people. Make me laugh. But I've got footage. I can't believe Aaron Woods actually hasn't come out about it, considering, he talked about Billy Slater. I thought he should have talked about Cameron Smith with his finger up his bum in Origin 2 back in 2013.
Maybe he's saving it up.
For his book.
Or for Origin next year.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, thanks for your comments today, mate.
You're welcome.
Yeah, some nice stuff there for the Bulldogs.
I want to also thank all the Doggies fans that have been writing messages underneath. Thank you, and you know where to find me if you want to talk Doggies.
Yeah. And rugby league coach, get the book. Read it on the plane. It was great. So get in there. It's good for.
I think to read it all, you'd probably need to fly a bit further than Melbourne.
Oh, I think it's good to read in parts, different things, sort of.
Yeah. I think all up, it takes about 4 hours to read if you were to read it front to back. I know I've read it 48 times, I think, while I was trying to write the thing. So.
Yeah.
All right, mate.
All right, mate.
Doggies fans,
thank you so much. Go the Dogs.
Thank you.
And see you soon, Lee.
See you, mate.